Morning, folks. It is morning in Japan, and I've decided that I will start a new series. I don't know how often I'll post about this, but it's going to be about critical scholars and how they made it. So, what is a critical scholar? A critical scholar is someone who's usually political liberal, but it doesn't really matter what their ideology is. They're a person who spends their free time and their professional time criticizing the Bible and its historical reliability. Now, we might say that they could also criticize Christianity, but their specific thing is trying to make it look like large sections of the Bible were not authored by who tradition says authored them. And, sorry, this is somebody's air conditioner. Super loud. So the original authors didn't actually write this book, or they didn't write this part of this book, and it's not historically reliable, and that's why you can't trust the Bible. That's basically their whole thing. And they are scholars, they have PhDs and master's degrees and professorships and so on. So we're going to talk about a quote from Bart Ehrman from his book Forged, published probably sometime within the past 10 years. He is a tenured professor at UNC, University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. He has sold over 1 million copies of his books. He does speaking gigs, I'm assuming paid, quite a lot. He's very successful. So let's read the quote. And I'm going to record the audio later, so I apologize if there's a change in the background noise or something. Up to this point in my discussion of ancient lying, deception, and forgery, I have been using the term, quote, truth, unquote, in a very simple sense, to mean something like correct information. In reality, though, truth and its opposite, falsehood, are complex. I think we all realize this deep down, even if we haven't given it a good deal of thought. When we watch a movie, we often ask, is this a true story? By that we mean, is this something that really happened? If the answer is yes, then we somehow feel assured and comforted that the events took place, and so as a story it is, quote, truer, unquote, than one that is just made up. One could easily make the case that a movie can be true in a deeper sense, even if it is about something that never happened. This has been my view for many years, and it used to drive my kids crazy when they were young. We'd be watching a movie and they'd say, Dad, is this a true story? And I'd almost always say yes. But then they'd remember that I tend to have a different view of things, and they'd ask the follow-up question. No, Dad, I mean, did this really happen? I'd say, no. And they'd continue to be puzzled. As some of my readers may be. How can a story be, quote, true, unquote, if it didn't happen? In point of fact, there are all sorts of true stories that didn't happen, as everyone will admit, I think, if they think about it a bit. Okay, so we've heard the quote. So, what has Mr. Ehrman established? He's established that, in his view, a story is true, that's his word, if it didn't actually occur, but he agrees with a lesson contained within the story, and therefore, according to him, in some sense, the story is true. And ironically, as he admits, this is confusing to the people in his personal life who don't trust him and have had to double check with him to make sure that he's actually saying what they think he's saying, because he's not trustworthy and makes up his own definitions of words to confuse people. That sounds about right. I think it's hilarious that he includes this example of his own children, because he probably thinks it's funny and that it poses him as a clever person who fools people or whatever. And I think he is a clever person who fools people, including his own family members. Goodness, growing up with a dad like that, not a good role model. But his personal failings aside, it's very illuminating. But before we talk about it more, I want to show you something else. It's called equivocation. In logic, equivocation, calling two different things by the same name, is an informal fallacy resulting from the use of a particular word or expression in multiple senses within an argument. It is a type of ambiguity that stems from a phrase having two or more distinct meanings, not from the grammar or structure of the sentence. Okay. So, I'm, by the way, climbing up a mountain right now. Can you see? A lot of climbing, so if I sound out of breath, that's why. This is how I get to work in the morning. Yes. Using two different definitions of a word. Now, in his case, he is positing a personal definition of a word. True means, basically, he is saying that true means the same thing as preferable. I prefer, I like this story, or I like this lesson within this story, and therefore it is a true story. So, that's definitely not what the word true means. It's just not. Words can have multiple definitions, but that is not a definition of the word true. But he's made that up. And now he is conflating his personal definition of true with the real definition of the word true, which is that it's an adjective, something is true, and that it corresponds to exists in objective reality. That's what that means. So, this makes me think of a story. So my grandfather used to live on a house that was situated on top of a small cliff right by the seaside. So you could just get on a ladder and climb down, you'd be right there at the sea. And so his front yard is on basically there's a slope that you can climb up to get to the front yard from the sea. And every morning he would go and feed his cats in the front yard. And so one morning my mom, when we were visiting him, went out and saw him out front. And she asked him, she said good morning and asked him how his morning had been. And he said that while he was feeding the cats, a baby sea otter, and those do live out front of his house, basically, in the ocean, a baby sea otter had come up and he had offered it some food and it ate right out of his hand. And initially my mom was very taken in by this story, as any of us would be. He's right there feeding the cats. It seems perfectly plausible. That's true. That makes sense. But then she remembered who she was talking to, and she said, now wait a minute. Is that true? Is that a true story? And he said, does it really matter? She did not like that answer. And that is absolutely the correct reaction. He was being dishonest. And he was doing that for his own amusement, which I suppose is probably not as bad as publishing a million books trying to lie to people. But it's not good behavior. And I don't exactly admire it. That's kind of a beloved family story because it's funny, but it's not good behavior. And it really makes me think of Bart Ehrman and others of his ilk, that they will make up their own version of history. They have this whole thing called the historical Jesus, where they think large sections of the Gospels they think it's not true and it wasn't really written by the original author, or they think the original author was lying about, something Jesus said. And so they excise large sections of the Gospels as well as other books in the Bible, and leave the parts that they prefer. And that's the real historical Jesus said those things, and the fake Jesus, the pseudepigraphal Jesus, that means a false writing, said these things. So they just take out large portions of the book, take whatever they don't like. This is who we're dealing with. Those are critical scholars. I think that kind of says it all, but I'll just kind of restate the point here. This person does not care what is objectively true. He has his own definition of truth, and he's engaging in equivocation to kind of steal the valor of truth. And why is this important? Well, it's important because human relationships. It's important to be able to trust the people around us, including people who are sources of information, like news sources or scholars with PhDs who are effectively endorsed by the university, who employs them, who publishes their material, and so on. We need to trust people, which means that they need not to lie to us. When my grandfather lied about the baby seal, that just reinforced my mom's pre-existing incorrect conception that he's not a particularly trustworthy person. This is a problem because people need to be able to interact with each other upon the presumption that what the other person is saying is true. And in lying, every time we lie, we're constantly undoing the trust that we all have in each other, including our trust in other people. Something you'll find when dealing with anybody who's dishonest is that they don't trust other people either. They don't trust other people, and that's why they're constantly lying themselves. They're constantly lying themselves, and that's why they don't trust other people, because of course, like everybody else in the world, their personal behavior is their frame of reference for other people's behavior. And so as they are a liar, they don't trust other people, and then they lie to other people, and then they further spread untrustworthy behavior and thus undermine a high-trust society. This last thing that I'm saying here is not a commentary on biblical scholarship per se. It's more about lying, but it's why this kind of behavior is bad, and it's why fundamentally it's important to not tolerate the behaviors of critical scholars. They need to be disciplined by their universities when they do things like this. But it's also just an example of why this is anti-Christian behavior, and people who think in the name of scholarship that it's good to tolerate the behavior of people like this and to employ them and publish their material when their whole thing is like, I don't care what is objectively true. I can tell a lie, a false story, and claim it is true because I like this story. This is a scholar. This is a person with a PhD. That's what you're dealing with.